Hi, my name's Carly Reid from CX Today, bringing you all the latest customer experience news from the industry. Now today we're joined by Peter Lorant from Zendesk. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Carly. Great to be with you today.
Thank you for joining us. Now we're going to be getting to know Peter a little bit better over the course of this exclusive interview, but Peter, for the sake of introductions, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Sure. I'm the COO for EMEA at Zendesk. I'm based here in London. I joined Zendesk back in September 2020 after spending about 4.5 years at Workday and 8 years at Google. For those who might not be familiar with Zendesk, we build customer engagement software to help companies of all shapes and sizes improve their customer relationships. We were founded back in Copenhagen in 2007, and we have over 100,000 customers in more than 160 countries and territories.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you, Peter. Now we're going to be discussing with Peter the Zendesk CX Trends Report and where customer experience is shifting following the COVID-19 pandemic. So Peter, let's get down to our questions.
Great.
First question today then, Peter. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Zendesk Customer Experience Trends Report and what did you think about the key findings, please?
Yeah, we conducted this massive research project back in late 2020, so quite a bit through the COVID pandemic journey. We surveyed about 90,000 businesses from around the world who were using Zendesk, and we identified 5 notable trends in customer experience. So the first one is just the spotlight on CX. As customers put more of their experiences online, CX is more important than ever before. What we found is about 3/4 of customers are will spend more to buy from a company that offers good CX. The second trend is that messaging is just getting bigger and bigger. Customers are seeking a more conversational way to engage with companies. 64% of customers started using a new customer service channel in 2020, and messaging was a big winner there. The third trend is agility is more important than ever before. Obviously, with the ongoing uncertainty and volatility, teams are looking for ways to be ready to adapt quickly and deliver support to their customers. And there we found 85% of teams reported to having to make significant changes to their support in 2020. Fourth trend is just workplaces are changing. Obviously, COVID has forced companies to rethink about their workplace strategy. Remote work is working, so businesses are thinking more about how to work smarter across distributed teams, and 50% of our respondents reported going fully remote last year. And the fifth one is we've reached a digital tipping point. The adoption of digital technology has been constantly evolving, but it's been speeding up as well. And we're now at the point of either adapt or get left behind. And there we found 3/4 of decision makers saying COVID has accelerated their adoption of digital technology. So those were 5 key trends that we could pull out.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter. And how have you seen customer experience placed in the spotlight over the past year?
CX is very much front and center of company strategy. I'd argue it always has been, but particularly now, and there's some subtle reasons behind that. The first one, during the pandemic, in-person interactions were limited for obvious reasons. So digital interaction became the primary engagement channel for companies to build rapport and a brand with their customers. And so that meant that the customer contact center team is in the spotlight as key brand ambassadors. And it's no longer about just how quickly you can resolve tickets and move on like a production battery line. It's about using it as a primary channel to build relationships with the customer. So empathy, service, and support is really critical. So that's one key trend. A second is just this meta trend that we're experiencing the now economy, where customers expect immediate response. We've had consumerization of technology, but it's now led to the consumerization of expectations. Customers are using methods of communication with companies that, are more like a consumer would, i.e. chat and messaging, and they demand that faster response time. And so we've seen, for example, the adoption of messaging support growing by over 110% year on year during the pandemic. And within that, because of that consumerization of expectations, companies are being benchmarked against best in class, and not just in their industry. So you could be running, I don't know, a hairdresser, a small salon, a bookshop, whatever, and you're now being held up against the same level that Amazon, Netflix, or Peloton is offering their customers. So really, if you're not modernizing your CX strategy to be best in class, you're falling really far behind. And we know one thing that hasn't changed as a result of the pandemic is that 50% will leave you after just one bad experience. So the stakes have never been higher, mediocrity gets punished, and the customer expectations are getting higher and higher.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. And do you think that the shifts to digital driven by the pandemic are here to stay?
I think absolutely. And when we're talking about shifting strategies, it's all about change. And change is like oxygen for businesses. One of my favorite quotes is, if you want things to stay as they are, then things are going to have to change. So change is constant in business. And if you believe, like Malcolm Gladwell talks about, the 10,000 hours driving a new behavior, then after the last year and a half of COVID, new behaviors have been created and they are here to stay. It's like we built muscle memory. And so if I look at this from both a customer perspective and from a company perspective, that I think will flesh it out a little bit. So from a customer perspective, what our survey has found is 64% of customers have started to use a new support channel, and 80% plan to keep using it. So it is that sticky way and sticky behavior. Another survey said just over a third of customers bought from a new company, and 84% plan to keep buying for them. So people are willing to shift people that they work with, people who they buy from. And I'm like one of those people, and I'll give you an example of, I love my tea. I'm pretty fanatical about my cup. And instead of just going to the regular supermarket, which has limited selection and kind of grumpy service, I started buying online from a specialist tea provider, and fantastic support, a wider selection, quick responses, and I won't be going back. And I think that's just a little example of what a lot of customers have started to do as a result of a pandemic. So that's from a customer perspective. Now, from a company perspective, Agile is very much back in fashion. There was a lot of froth in the market before the pandemic, and companies were deploying massive digital projects that would take years and years to get done, to scope, to implement, and drive change throughout the business. And now what we're seeing is the trend for deploying technology is that it needs to be done in a matter of weeks or months, not years, because who knows what the world is going to be like in another 12 months. And so, again, our research found that CX leaders said that the ability to quickly adapt to the evolving needs of customers was their biggest challenge and their highest priority going forward. I'll give an example of just how one of our customers was very agile and had built the CX culture. And this comes from a Spanish shipping company called Balearia, who had to respond quickly to the rapidly changing transportation rules and cope with a sudden jump of requests from customers because trips were being canceled at very short notice. So to put it into perspective, in 1 month, they received the same volume of requests that they would usually get in 1 year. And so they had to spin up additional support teams to cope with that spike in demand. And they were able to train these new temporary staff in Zendesk in as little as 30 minutes. So that's agile. They also had to pivot their tools to be more messaging based so they could provide real-time support to their customers. And so they implemented a chat solution from Zendesk in just 2 days, so they could proactively send mobile boarding passes and offer support to passengers via WhatsApp. So that's just one example, but now that is what agile looks like.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. And some great examples there as well. So thank you for sharing those. And where are you seeing your customers invest in CX? And are you seeing some slowdown in their investments as well, please?
I'd have to say, from what we can see, the world of CX is seeing an acceleration as companies have pulled forward their key digital projects. Our research found that 75% of companies say that the pandemic has sped up technology adoption, and 50% say it's accelerated by between 1 to 3 years, and a quarter say it's accelerated between 4 and 7 years. So that's been a tremendous pull forward of investment in CX. And there are three areas in particular of investment that we've seen. One is the adoption of this conversational business platform, as businesses rush to digitize, and again, the personal lives to business. They've started to adopt the messaging, which I talked about just earlier. The second is utilization of bots to increase self-service. AI is able to provide much more fluid, value-add, conversational support to customers. Google has taught us to use self-service. It's a logical progression, and the consumers have adopted it very, very quickly. The third area is investment in deeper analytics. Firstly, to justify the expenditure in CX technology, but the second is to be much more agile and to try and get those early sign of new trends and customer feedback. If there's going to be future black swan events, companies want to know about it very quickly so that they can respond very, very agile. And we've been talking about digital for a long time. This isn't really anything new. And as has been in the past, you're either the disrupted or the disruptor. So if it's a trade-off we find between investing in CX versus other projects, most companies are doing what they can to ring-fence initiatives to keep their current customers happy, or invest in differentiating their service to win new customers.
Great stuff. Thank you, Peter. And last question for you today then. So some choose to focus on technology as the solution, but how does team and business culture really play a role in this?
I think that the tech that a company uses says a lot about the culture of the company. And when you look, for example, at your own tech stacks, are you open or are you locked down? Do you have strong collaboration tools? Are you able to deploy projects in an agile manner? So tech and culture are almost flip sides of the same coin. So of course, technology is an important part of the solution, but it's not the entire story. I'll give an example of that. Companies like Balearia, who've seen a significant spike in the volume of customer support queries, could either just throw a lot more bodies at the solution and hire a lot of people to cope with the increased demand, or they can adopt, bots and AI and feed into that self-service economy that I talked about. And another example is Discord, the gaming platform. It saw a 300% increase in the number of bot questions coming in. So again, you have to be very quick, and the adoption of technology is by far the quickest and most scalable solution. So technology definitely has a very important role to play. But to quote the management guru, Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So the culture is absolutely critical to corporate survival, and focusing on customers never been more important. And what I've seen in conversations with boards is CX is becoming a much more strategic board imperative. It's not just seen as a cost center. The deep investment in CX data and analytics is giving board more information to better understand their customer and how their own business is performing. So that's really, really critical shift. And second is CX is moving beyond the help desk. It's all about how support teams collaborate across the business, from sales, marketing, and product teams, and really connecting the dots internally. And then thirdly, it's all about meeting customers where they are. It's not about kettling them into a certain channel of email and voice, but it's about the culture shift to engaging with customers in the channel of their choosing. So ultimately, culture comes from people, not just technology. And we know that great EX drives great CX. So great employee experience drives great customer experience. And last number to throw out is that, after the pandemic, agents are feeling exhausted. We found that 68% report to feeling overwhelmed. And so if over 2/3 of your agents aren't in a good place, it's unlikely that they're going to provide outstanding customer experience to your customers. So I guess my parting message is give your agents more love.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. Now, sadly, that's all we have time for today, but special thanks to Peter from Zendesk for joining us. Thank you again, Peter.
Pleasure.
Lovely to have you with us today. Now, if you enjoyed our exclusive interview with Peter from Zendesk, then please do share our video on social media. It's always greatly appreciated when you do so, and do subscribe to our channel as well. So from myself and from Peter, it's goodbye for now. I'm Carly Reid from CX Today. Thank you for watching.